When a popular high school teacher was found dead of a gunshot wound, investigators believed it was an accident.
January 29th.
But an audio tape recorded by the victim just 3 days before his death raised serious questions that required answers.
Great recreational facilities for children and families, and you'll find that here.
At Durham High School, Russell Stager was a popular baseball coach and driver's education teacher, a man respected by faculty and students alike. Jennifer Joyner was one of Russ Stager's students.
All the kids who needed advice or needed someone to talk with about their problems, Coach Stager, his door was always open, and he just meant a lot to the kids there.
After college, Russ Stager married his high school sweetheart, Jo Lynn.
Russ was a very gentle, compassionate, caring, full of life human being. He embraced life. He had a very tender heart.
Unfortunately, Stager wasn't as successful in his personal life as he was in his professional life. After 4 years of marriage, Russ and Jo Lynn divorced. Less than a year later, Russ married a 31-year-old widow, Barbara Ford. He adopted her 2 sons, Brian and Jason.
He took in Barbara's sons as his own. He loved them, he cared for them, and treated them like they were his own sons.
Barbara worked as a secretary at Duke University Medical Center. Russ continued to teach and coach. He worked weekends in the National Guard, and with his new wife, Barbara, taught Sunday school in their church. By all outward appearances, Russ and Barbara Stager lived a storybook life. But all that changed in the early morning hours of February 1st, 1988. Just as the night shift was ending, police got an emergency call of a shooting at the Stager home, Pillow. When she did, the gun accidentally fired, shooting Russ in the back of the head. The death was ruled an accidental shooting.
He was a mentor, he was a baseball coach, he was a likable guy to so many children at a Durham High School. And they felt a sense of loss, they felt a sense of shock, they felt a sense of disbelief. What has happened to the guy that we loved?
When I first heard it, I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, not Coach Stager.
He was a great coach and everything. When I heard the news, I felt sorry in my heart.
History had unfortunately repeated itself. In a bizarre coincidence, Barbara's first husband had died in a shooting accident too. He was cleaning his .25 caliber pistol when it accidentally went off, shooting himself in the chest. Barbara Stager was now a widow once more because of a shooting mishap.
The fact that the gun was kept under a pillow, that a wife had accidentally pulled it out, and the gun had gone off while in her hand and struck the back of her husband's head in certainly a fatal blow. All of those factors need to be looked at real closely because they're just unusual. They're not your normal set of events.
A few hours after Russ Stager's death, Detective Rick Buchanan went to the Stager home to ask some routine questions.
Good morning.
When he got there, Barbara Stager's father was removing the bloody sheets, pillow, and bedspread. Since the death had been ruled accidental, the bedding was not considered evidence. It was Buchanan's first interview with Barbara Stager.
She was a little withdrawn, perhaps, but she was not overly friendly. She was not boo-hooing all the way through the interview or anything of that nature. We walked into the bedroom. She showed me around. By then, the bedroom had already been cleaned up, the linens removed, bed made up, just like a normal day at the house.
Barbara Stager repeated her account of her husband's death, saying the gun went off accidentally as she pulled it from under her husband's pillow. She told Buchanan that her 9 years of marriage to Russ had been happy, that he was a great father to her 2 young boys.
Something wasn't right. I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know exactly what it was, but it still wasn't enough to indicate anything other than an accidental shooting.
The news of Russ Stager's death was particularly troubling to his first wife, Jo Lynn.
My mom said he was accidentally shot by his wife. And my reaction was, it was no accident. And that's what I said to my parents. And I remember my dad said, you can't know that it was no accident. You can suspect, but you can't know. And I said, no, I know that it was no accident.
Jo Lynn wrote a letter to police because Russ often confided in her. Russ told her that Barbara removed large sums of money from their bank account and that he suspected Barbara was having sexual affairs with other men. He had once caught her kissing another man in a parking lot. When investigators looked into Barbara Steger's background, they learned some surprising information about her first marriage.
Her first husband had died in bed and was killed at the business end of a .25 caliber pistol. And so now we have a lady who's had two husbands killed in bed with a .25 caliber gun. And on both occasions she was present. And both of them on first appearance were ruled accidental. So immediately we began looking at this closely.
Barbara's first husband, Larry Ford, had been cleaning his .25 caliber pistol when it accidentally discharged, shooting him in the chest. Although the death of Larry Ford had been ruled an accident, his family vigorously fought to have the case investigated as a possible murder. But the ruling was never changed. Barbara inherited Larry Ford's entire estate, and suspicions remained. Investigators now had another suspicious death and more questions about the same woman.
I desperately wanted to know that truth. I wanted a full-blown investigation. If it was accidental, I wanted that to be known. But if it was not accidental, as I so suspected, I wanted that to come out too.
90% of what we do is common sense, and then we apply the other 10% to law. And if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, by God, it's going to be a duck.
Was it possible that Barbara Steger was not unlucky at all, but was, in fact, a serial killer? The death of Barbara Steger's first husband, Larry Ford, by an accidental self-inflicted gunshot. The gun had a 4-pound trigger pull, which is no hair trigger. Deliberate force would be required to fire the gun, a contradiction of Barbara Steger's story. In the autopsy, medical investigators discovered another discrepancy. The trajectory of the fatal bullet was not consistent with Barbara Steger's account. The bullet struck Russ Steger's head in a downward angle. Barbara claimed that the gun fired as she pulled it from under the pillow, which would have sent the bullet in an upward trajectory.
The angle of the trajectory would indicate that she was above and behind Russ when the shot was fired, as opposed to shooting from bed level up into the back of his head, which would give an upward trajectory. So it was, the autopsy was inconsistent with the story she was telling.
The spent shell casing was found just inches from the gun near Russ Steger's head. Eugene Bishop test-fired the pistol and found that it ejected shell casings to the right and rear of the shooter, which meant, if Barbara's version was correct, the shell casing should have been found somewhere in the middle of the bed.
As far as the story is concerned, was not what she was saying in her story did not coincide with my findings. Looking at the crime scene pictures of the cartridge case itself, where it was laying on the bed, it could not have been fired as she said it was fired.
When any firearm is discharged, dust, oil, and gunpowder are expelled from the barrel. If Barbara's version was correct, powder burns would have been present on the sheets. The sheets had been removed by Barbara's father immediately after the shooting and had been laundered. But powder residue can be identified, even after fabrics have been washed. When the sheets were examined, scientists found no evidence of gunpowder residue. With all of these contradictions, Detective Rick Buchanan asked Barbara Steger to demonstrate on videotape what happened on the morning of the accident.
Oh, I'm standing face to face with the killer. I know it, but she don't know I know it.
With the detective playing the part of Russ Steger, Barbara Steger recreates her version of the story.
And I don't know how it was in my hand. I have no idea if I touched it. I don't know. I don't know.
And almost immediately, she realizes there are inconsistencies.
Well, wait a minute, that wasn't quite on. Okay. And then I start getting up. Okay, that's how it was. I start getting up with it in my hand, but I don't know how I had it in my hand. Okay.
But she's repositioning the body in the bed with her, trying to make it fit her story, and she can't do it. As I watched the video and replayed it and replayed it and replayed it, there was no doubt at all that she intentionally shot and killed Russ Stager. No doubt whatsoever.
Police also doubted and signed these documents. Who did?
There was actually forged checks where Russ Stager's account was being drawn upon and the money was being deposited in Barbara Stager's account. So all of the financial evidence tended to show that Barbara was in debt and Russ did not know about it.
The beneficiary of the forged life insurance policy with a payout of $170,000 was none other than his wife, Barbara Stager. The final piece of evidence in the case came from a most unlikely source. At Durham High School, one of Russ Stager's students was cleaning a gym locker when he came upon a cassette tape. The voice on the tape was one he recognized immediately.
This is Russ Stager. This is January 29th, 1988, 10 minutes of 2. You can see great, but I did see that they were in the car making out and stuff like this. When I was
listening to that tape was surreal. I had never, ever experienced anything quite like that in prosecution, where you try a case, a person for homicide, and yet the victim, who you represent, who has no voice in the courtroom, is now telling you what he is feeling, experiencing, and worried about immediately prior to his execution, so to speak.
Investigators now had both evidence and motive. Barbara Stager was arrested on a charge of first-degree murder.
Here, these will help you sleep.
Prosecutors believe that Barbara Stager had been planning her husband's death for weeks.
There would have been nothing but theory and speculation. And you can't prosecute theory and speculation. You've got to have physical evidence. That's where the forensics came in.
Barbara Stager was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death. The sentence was later reduced to life in prison after an appeal. The verdict was a bittersweet victory and little consolation for the loss of a dear friend and loved one.
I think those of us who cared so deeply for Russ ranted and raved and felt this was so unfair to take someone so special and so kind. And there's never an answer to why. There's never an answer to why evil wins sometimes.
Prosecutors also suspect that Barbara Stager was responsible for her first husband's death. But with her current life sentence, they see no need for further prosecution.
There's no doubt, although she appears to be a middle-class, everyday mom and wife who teaches Sunday school, there is a dark side to her in particular, and it even goes beyond dark. With her, it's just pitch black. There's something that never came out, never suspected. It's unfortunate that Russ Stager is dead.
This case was a terrible tragedy. A good man, not just one but two, are gone. And they're gone forever because of the criminal conduct of Barbara Stager. And our court system worked. It uncovered the truth. A verdict was rendered and justice was done.